Okay. Welcome to the August 18th, 2020 Policy Committee meeting. Has the meeting been properly posted, Lynn?
Yes, it has.
Thank you. See no citizens in the audience, so we'll skip that. We also have no bright lights scheduled. We do have, Corey is not available tonight for some other reason. And we do have minutes from 2 meetings to approve. The reason we have that is because one of them was kind of an urgent meeting. We didn't take the minutes of the previous meeting up at that. So I will first seek approval of the minutes for our committee meeting on July 21st.
I so move.
You move, and I will second that. Any discussion on that, Diane?
No.
I have none. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 2-0, Lynn.
Thank you.
And we have, let me change this now. And we have minutes for the August 10th meeting. That was the one that was kind of an emergency meeting that we had, something we had to process it immediately and get it in. And by the way, we did that. So again, motion for approval of the August 10th meeting.
I so move.
Moved by Diane, seconded by myself. I don't think there was anything else on that. Do you have any questions? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 2-0, Lynn.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we do have action items on some policies tonight. They would be in the category that we refer to as the legal group, where final approval for these policies can be accomplished at the committee meeting. Is that correct, Joe?
It is, yes.
That's correct. So our first one deals with conflict of interest, and it's there are actually 4 policies here dealing with all the same, basically the same wording. 0144.3, policy 1130, policy 3230, policy 4230. Those last 3 are grouped by employee groups, staff, professional, I forget.
Professional staff, support staff, and then administration.
Okay. So do you want to give us a quick?
Yeah, the only change is just some legal language. If you look at the last paragraph of the policy where it starts out as a violation of this policy, to take action or refrain from taking action for an administrative employee to otherwise use his or her public position to obtain a financial gain or anything of substantial value for himself, herself, or his or her immediate family as defined. And so the addition to this policy is just the addition of the statutory language.
Right, and I think that's true in all the ones we're talking.
Same change in all the policies,
Right.
yes.
So, there they are. Okay. Diane, thank you.
I'll make a motion and then we can, point of discussion. But I move that we approve the legal change that has been made to policy 0144.3 and 1130 and 3230 and 4230.
And I will second that motion. And did you say you had something?
These are the same policies that we reviewed back on April 10th of 2019.
Yes.
So not that long ago.
Correct.
And it's just a change of referencing the statute. So it's really, truly fits in this category of just a legal tweak.
Yep. Very minor change.
Okay. There's no other discussion on that. All those in favor of approving, let me back up one. Policy number, there. No, well, those 4 policies, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 2-0, Lynn.
Thank you.
Oh, I got to get back to where I want to be. Okay. The next is, again, we have 2 policies that are somewhat related, but we will deal with them separately. Policy 2260, non-discrimination and access to equal educational opportunity. This is revised. There are some updates in there. Joel?
Yeah, there's the two major changes to this policy. The first is the situation where the district's compliance officer is not able to or not available to investigate an issue of non-discrimination or an issue of discrimination due to conflict, bias, partiality, for other reasons that impair. So it talks then about the process then that would go forward to engage the outside legal counsel to conduct the investigation of this. So that is an add to the policy. A deletion to the policy talks about it's a more or less just a basic records retention statement. And then there's the addition of retention of investigatory, sorry about that, records and materials. And then it outlines for us all the things that we need to maintain as part of our investigation. So those were the three changes to this policy.
And in all that list of things that we have to maintain or not maintain, did some things were just crossed out? Was there anything, for instance, written witness statements is crossed off and gone? Does that mean we don't have to maintain that?
Correct. We don't have to maintain those.
Oh. Okay, that's 2260, right?
Again, this aligns with
This one, and I didn't get that far in my reading here. Oh, maybe that's on the next one, where CO is not available. You can have the superintendent or go outside.
Yep, that was the first change.
What is there? Okay.
Yeah. Kind of in the middle of the policy.
Yeah, I slipped past it. Thank you. Okay, Diane, any questions on 2260?
I'd like to make a motion to approve policy number 2260 for non-discrimination and access to equal opportunity, equal educational opportunity as presented.
Thank you. I'll second that. Any further questions you have on this one? Nor do I. So all in favor of approval of policy 2260, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? 2-0, Lynn.
Thank you.
Okay. Now we go to policy 2260.01. Really to bring these two policies to be consistent with each other, right, Joe?
Yeah, this is to address some consistency between, so Section 504 ADA, prohibition against discrimination based on disability. This does talk about the Title IX complaint coordinators, the CO. If you scroll down to the third page at the bottom, it talks about by within 5 business days, we will confirm receipt of a complaint. That is an addition there, an addition. Then in the next page, on page 4, you'll see the same language as in the prior policy in cases where no district CO is available, how we will address that. At the bottom of page 4, you'll see all public records created, the same deletion from the last policy and this policy. And then they took, under retention of public records, student records, investigatory, they took the policy language from the previous policy and they put it in here for a level of consistency.
Okay,
So,
yeah, that's-
again, talks about the records that we will retain as part of our investigation.
And again, that's to make this all consistent between
Yep.
the, yeah. Diane?
I would like to make a motion that we approve policy number 2260.01, section 504, ADA, prohibition against discrimination based on disability as presented.
I'll second that. I have no questions, do you? All in favor of accepting that policy, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? 2-0, Lynn.
Thank you.
Okay, if anybody's wondering, these are things that were pretty well drawn up for us on a legal basis and really didn't deserve a lot of conversation, so that's why they're relatively, and we'd been through them once before anyway.
Right,
So,
yes. Second reading here tonight.
so that's safety. Okay, that takes care of our 3 action items. And it was by previous meetings, we had a couple items we wanted to discuss or deal with information on. revision of policy 3122.01 and 4122.01, drug-free workplace. And there was something we were trying to.
Yeah, this was a policy that was discussed pretty heavily at committee and then again at the board. Just about, what we can require, as far as staff behavior as it pertains to drugs. And so there were two additions that came into question. The first addition was each staff handbook will include a summary of the standards regarding unlawful possession, use, distribution of illicit drugs or alcohol by staff. Furthermore, staff members shall be informed that compliance with this requirement is mandatory. The use of marijuana or other products containing THC, other than products expressly excluded from the definition of a scheduled drug, hemp-derived CBD oil, etc., is prohibited under Wisconsin law and board policy. Use of such products, even in states which have passed state laws permitting usage, is unlawful under federal law and Wisconsin law and is not an exception to the drug-free workplace policy. Some of the discussion came up, is this a legal change or is this a recommended change? This turns out to be a recommended change. We did work with Neola on it, knowing that there are states as close as I believe Illinois that have passed recreational marijuana laws. States that do not have those on the books must comply with a drug-free workplace policy. So it's what we have on. So this language addresses that. So really it's saying that you can't have marijuana in your system, THC in your system as an employee here. Off-work conduct, this was another one, and this came down, we had quite a bit of discussion as far as images, that may be captured and then posted on social media that could diminish the staff members' ability to safely and effectively perform their duties. That we will investigate the matter and that we may issue discipline. There was some discussion out of board members around, is it fair that we would discipline someone for doing something in their private life that then became public through social media? Again, this was a recommended addition just due to the fact that people will post on social media and it will have a substantial impact on their ability to perform their duties in a school district, and that it can have a negative impact on the overall school. I can't speak for Dr. Siebert's experience, but we have as a district had to address employees who have done things outside of work, and it's been very time consuming and even costly on behalf of the district to address those things. So again, we recommend that this be added in here. I do know that Mr. Montijo had a number of questions about the policy, and in his absence, I don't know if the committee would like to hold off another month to discuss this in September.
Dan?
That was my recommendation last month, and I would suggest that we save this item for the September committee meeting as a discussion item that he could be part of.
I have no strong feeling that I think it's probably ready to go, but I'm willing to wait. I'm going to make sure. Is there any, in your mind, Joe, is there any urgency?
No, we still can discipline people for doing all of the anything that's listed in there, we have the ability to discipline them.
And the key factor in here is it's the word may.
Right.
It doesn't absolutely require that we have discipline for that person if it's.
Right. If you were to look at the full scope of what, could constitute somebody, quote unquote, being in trouble, that could be a conversation that says don't do it again. That could be discipline that, is up to and including termination. It just depends on the situation. An important thing for the board always to know is that if somebody were to be recommended for termination, the appeal is to the Board of Ed. Then would hear the appeal. And so if the board felt that the termination was inappropriate, the board could always overturn that. It's just a matter of what the administration deems as an offense that would require a level of discipline. We deal with, the full gamut of situations from, knock it off, don't do that again, all the way to, written suspensions and so on and so forth. So,
yeah.
But we can certainly talk about it when Mr. Montijo is present. And I guess from an administrative standpoint, I'd like to know, just clearly what the concerns are from board members in the committee, so that if there is any back work or, legwork that I need to do, I can go ahead and do that.
That's good. That statement, maybe we should, before we meet in September, I have no issues with it, but if Diane or Corey, maybe we should remind them, if there's something you're wondering about, get it to us in advance so we can have a conversation, just not another, let's do it over again, over and again.
And again, because it's not a pressing issue,
Okay.
you know.
Because we can't operate, right?
Right, we can operate. If there was an issue that pertained to our operations, I would push a little bit harder on that, but
Okay.
this is
I
not
guess
one of those
that's the
issues.
critical part to me, too.
Yep.
Okay. All right. That was, oops, got to move ahead here. Policy 5630.01, use of seclusion and physical restraint with students.
Yeah, so we've had seclusion and restraint in policy for a long time, even prior to the Neola changeover. It's been reviewed occasionally over time. Our district, just to give you some perspective, the board policy talks about the conditions under which, seclusion and restraint can be used. And generally speaking, you would use a restraint on a student when they're doing something that is deemed unsafe, where they could cause bodily harm to themselves or others. That would be a time to use restraint. Seclusion is something that you would be discussing perhaps in the scope of an IEP meeting where you're discussing the best way for a student to become dysregulated or go from dysregulated to regulated in the school environment, where they may need that timeout room area. Again, all of that is addressed in the IEP. For some perspective, we have about 450 staff members that are trained in nonviolent crisis intervention. We run that training many times over the course of the year. We have a team of individuals that are trained as trainers, so we can provide refresher training, initial training, review training. I mean, we do a lot with this. The board in the next week or so will be getting our report on seclusion and restraint from the last school year. There are a number of cases that are listed in there. It does apply to both regular and students in special education, so it will address all kids in our school system. This is not to be confused with the policy that we discussed a couple months back around corporal punishment. This is not a situation where if a kid were running at the road and a staff member were to grab them and pull them away, prevent them from getting hurt. This isn't a situation where a staff member would be breaking up a fight. And this certainly isn't corporal punishment in any way, shape, or form. There are guidelines that we must follow. There are steps that we must do in order to address seclusion and restraint, including notification of parents, making sure that reports are available for families so that they can see it. There's a need to document in writing all of the instances of seclusion and restraint. And we do provide many, many reminders on this, a lot of training, and we hold ourselves accountable as a school district to.
On the training, and you said we had 400 and some odd people trained on that. A question comes up: are the SROs trained on that?
The SROs are not trained on that. They're a policing unit, so we don't call on the SROs to intervene when a student is receiving an IEP service. That is not not part of that training. They're not trained in nonviolent crisis intervention, unless the police department provides that training, but it's not a district-provided training.
But if there is an incident that's nearby and the police officer is nearby to deal with it, what happens?
Police officer will use a police officer's discretion.
Okay, and that's their ballgame.
Address these things. Again, think the students who require seclusion and restraint, general ed students who would require seclusion and restraint are more likely than not elementary age kids who are, dysregulated prior to being in special education. We have staff at those schools trained. It's not staffed by an SRO. Generally at the middle school and high school level, when you're dealing with situations that become physical, that would require an SRO to respond, you're dealing with a situation that falls outside of seclusion and restraint.
I see that.
And that would be covered under the other policy that we have on the books that talks about a staff member's ability to break up a fight, to prevent injury, things like that.
Okay. And what about the custodial team? Do they have any training on dealing with students?
No.
Okay. Any questions,
I mean,
Diane?
wouldn't be out of the question if they were tapped on to be a support. We would provide that.
You could.
But again, we have 450 individuals working in
that's-
23 schools
That's-
that are trained in
That's pretty close to
seclusion restraint.
50%, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, our student services staff, our principals, all of our special education teachers, all of our special ed aides are trained.
I was just going to say that there's, as I was looking at the mandatory training piece of it, and it's a procedure that it's not just a once and done. It's
Right.
it reviewed
Yeah.
every 2 years, I think.
Every 2 years, so you do a full day training, day or two. I'd have to double check the hours, but it's a full training. You get, quote unquote certified, and then 2 years later you have to take a refresher, and then 2 years later we require that everybody go through the full training again. So you are fully trained every 4 years. You get a refresher every other year. And this is something that is not used, all the time, but the people who use it are familiar with how to use it.
Now, this tonight, all we're doing is discussing this one. Refresh me, is this one in the basket waiting to be operated on or not?
We've used this for years. So
There's nothing pending that we have.
Mr. Montijo asked that we bring it forward and talk about it when we had the corporal punishment discussion. And
Okay.
so I'm bringing it to you just to give you some background on it, some perspective.
Yeah.
From a school district standpoint, Karen Peterson has led our initiative on training. She has been a trainer herself. She's been involved with it for 20 years. So, we have a person with a high level of expertise who, has led the training initiative. And then I think we have 5 or 6 individual staff member who are trained the trainers. So it's something that is very well functioning in Waukesha.
And, Diane and I have been around a while, so we kind of have a feeling for it, but maybe Corey, what he might want to do is visit with you
Yeah, we
and
certainly
our
could-
team.
Yeah, we welcome, anybody who's got any questions on it, we certainly welcome them to call or stop in. We can make time. I would just ask, I guess, for a little bit of reprieve in the next couple of weeks as we
Yep,
prepare to
yep.
get school up and running, but certainly would take the time in the future to talk to anybody on this.
Okay, good. If
Just
I
by
g-
way of comment. yeah,
Yes.
If this is a 2015 policy, I don't think there's been any concerns related to it, that have been brought up.
No, I mean,
It's just more of I think, an understanding for Corey than anything.
right. I mean, it's something that, from a school district standpoint, it's one of those things that's necessary. We want to make sure that we have staff trained so that they know how to do it. We don't want ever to be in a situation where a kid would get hurt, as a result of a restraint or, but there are times where we need to use it. I mean, there are times when kids become dysregulated, where we need the ability to put our hands on them. And it's our obligation to make sure that our staff, our administration is trained in order to do that, to prevent, injury, the injury of students. We wish we didn't have to do it. We strive to do the proactive things. Again, a major component of the nonviolent crisis training is the verbal de-escalation prior to actually putting your hands on somebody. So there's a lot of time that's spent on how to take a student who is escalating and try to get them to de-escalate, recognizing, through the FBA process, the functional behavior analysis, why the student may be triggered, avoiding those triggers, teaching replacement behaviors and such. So we do a lot of work on the front end. The restraint piece and the seclusion piece is, you like to think that that's the last resort, in dealing with a behavior situation.
Ann?
And I think the wording of the policy, they're looking for the least restrictive intervention feasible.
Correct.
Yes.
For that student, so, and I think our staff does a good job with this.
Okay, so we can, I think as far as the meetings are concerned, we can kind of close this one out for maybe direct information if he wants to get it from you. Good.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, 2522, elected officials speaking in schools or to students, and policy 2240, controversial issues in the classroom.
This was brought up by Mrs. Voigt back in June, I believe, after the vice president and the secretary of education came to the district on a visit. And what we wanted to do at the policy committee level was to talk about, what we feel is to be appropriate, for elected officials. I think that, when you look at 2522, for instance, The speaker must be an elected official, not somebody campaigning or in nomination for office. Elected officials must normally not appear during campaigns. The topic must be pre-submitted in a timely fashion. The visit must be nonpartisan in tone. Parents may excuse their children. So, I guess, just a couple of these things, to be noted. You're hard pressed to find a time when an elected official is not campaigning. I don't try not to be, too sarcastic with that comment, but the minute that you're elected, generally there's a goal to become reelected. So sometimes, you go in and, some things are photo ops, whatever it might be. We, prior to the event in June, the position that we had when we discussed this policy is that there can be great benefit in bringing elected officials into schools to see the good things that we're doing. We have had that happen. The state superintendent was at Summit View to award them their magnet school status a few years back. We've had representatives in our schools to take a look at the options that we provide families. This again goes prior to the visit on June, whatever it might have been, beginning of June. So we have a history of welcoming people in. Governor Walker was in at South looking at the engineering academies a few years ago. So we don't want to, I don't believe that we want to make a prohibition against having people come in who are elected, because there's a lot of benefit. We do a lot of good things here in Waukesha. I think that though there was some question as to the event that was had, and we're certainly up to talk about it. If we could, before we get into a discussion, though, I'd like to just go to the second policy that we have listed here, because that was also the other one that talked about elected officials on our school grounds. And that would be, if I can open it up, controversial issues in the classroom. Again, we do provide teachers the ability to talk about controversial issues in the classroom. There are certain requirements of it, and making sure that we provide a balanced treatment of anything that could be perceived as controversial. So these are the two policies that we have. And if the board or the committee would like to entertain changes, we certainly can. But just wanted to make you aware that we have a history of discussing controversial issues in classrooms and also having elected officials on school grounds.
Dan, you wanted to say something?
I do. I feel very strongly about both of these policies, because as an educator, I invited a legislator in every semester I was teaching my business law class, because I felt it was important for the kids to be able to see them as real people and understand what the legislative process was and how you could have involvement in that procedure. Currently, as a school board member, I've been working very hard to try to invite legislators in. We did have a luncheon in February, I believe, right before
we shut down.
Right before we shut down. And we invited several legislators in just here for a meal. But ideally, I wanted to get them out to the schools and see what's going on, because that is much more meaningful than just watching a slideshow about all the good things we're doing.
Oh.
So that's one of the things that through SWSA is a huge goal, to try to be able to talk to them during the in-between times when it isn't budget writing time, and let them know, what our expenses are, let them know what kinds of opportunities we're providing, et cetera, et cetera. So I definitely don't want to limit the opportunity to invite them in. And like you said, as soon as you're elected, you're campaigning. So I don't know if we would maybe change that wording per se, to identify the fact that that's true. But I don't know that I want to change it either, because I think it's important that we have the opportunity to be able to invite those legislators in. I think it's a really important part of what we're doing.
Yeah, they do hold the purse strings and they set policy at the state level, and it's better that they do that educated. If we can educate them on the front end, then they can either, acknowledge the education that they've been given on the topic or ignore it and still cast their vote. But, we still want to put ourselves in a position where we've, done our best to advocate for our schools, for public ed, for our teachers and such. So
I agree. I think it has to be maintained as policy here, that'd be done. There will always be a bit of a tightrope that you're walking on some of these, because as to whether they come with an issue and we're surprised by it, or whether the timing is really right those things came up to play in the most recent one, and maybe it was a good move, maybe it wasn't a good move, but there is a need to continue communications with the political side of things, so sometimes I wish it was more successful. All the times I've been here and all the legislative breakfasts we've had, I keep wondering where we can count a positive note to it, so. Diane?
I think one of the things that I had shared with many people that were concerned at the time of this visit was that we were inviting, Ms. DeVos to come in like for 2 years. And it just so happened that she says yes when they're here for another campaign visit. That was one of the things that we had talked about doing earlier on. And, the timing turned out to look like it was a campaign visit rather than coming in to find out about the notion of our charter schools and the wonderful opportunities that are available in a public school for charter, which a lot of people across the state don't know. And we felt it was going to be a great opportunity to be able to share that our charter school is Achieve, an online school, and to get that word out across the state, for people to be aware that that's an option available to sign up for this school year. So I think the underlying reasons behind why we had invited her in the first place were very, very valid, and the timing just didn't turn out to be ideal.
Yeah, and I don't want to point it out, but school board members are also elected officials, and this policy does talk about elected officials in the classroom. And I know that you and Bill in particular, you guys are in our schools frequently, and I think we want to make sure that we, allow people in to talk. I don't know how many times you've been interviewed on your responsibilities as a board member, but Bill, you and I have had to entertain a couple of kids at the high school level on policy discussions throughout the years based off of them reaching out to you. So, I think it's fair for us to always allow elected officials to come in. We don't want to turn it into campaign rallies or anything like that, but there's a lot that can be learned from the experience of our elected officials at all levels.
Yeah, there is, and it's part of our world, so.
And that's what I believed as an educator, for years and years and years. There was a year that never went by that I didn't have a legislator in my classroom. So I think I did some research on this. Some of the more recent discussion related to when President Obama was first elected, and he had wanted to do a nationwide address.
Yep.
And the school board at that time said, no, he couldn't do it. And that, concern at that point, was the last time that this particular policy, got kind of shaken up a little bit.
And I do think that we need to be mindful as an organization, Board of Education included, that if we are truly going to keep this nonpartisan, not picking a side, not allowing it to be a campaign rally, that the board and the administration here understands that, if it's a valid message to be shared, doesn't matter if it's coming from a Democrat, a Republican, liberal, conservative, nonpartisan official, as long as it's appropriate for the school environment, and it pertains to the curriculum or whatever it might be, that we can't just pick and choose. And I do know I had some of those same emails. I had people approach me, staff and parents. You said no to Obama, but yes to Pence. And that does put us in a very difficult position, all around. So
one of the reasons, and I was here then, with one of the things I remember in the Obama speech was the backlash was just the opposite. The backlash was, what's the matter with you people? The president of the United States can't, and this was after election, so it wasn't campaigning.
Yep.
I honestly don't remember clearly. I thought we might have ended up actually allowing it in some situations, but we did get a backlash from the families.
Right.
What's the matter with you guys?
Right. It's important.
And I think it was done relatively quickly without much thought.
School districts are non-political entities. We're here to provide an education to kids. There's policies funding, the whole business, but we're in the bottom line was we're here to provide education to kids, and we don't get the ability, the fortune to decide or sway one way or another. We just have to do our jobs as educators.
Okay.
The other one was referenced, the other policy about controversial issues. Again, I think this is really very well worded. Again, my years of teaching, In the discussion of any controversial issue in the classroom, the teacher may express their personal opinion only after all the student discussion on the topic is conducted. The notion is that we maintain a neutral approach to things. Many of my students never had a clue, what political party I might have been supporting, during, a lot of controversial times in our school system. And I think that that's one of the things that they referenced in the letter as well. That's really kind of drilled into us as teachers, that we have to maintain, kind of a neutral approach to controversial topics. Help kids to think through, because I think it's really important that they take a look at what those controversial topics are all about and let them, analyze the pros and cons and make some decisions about it. But yeah, again, we're not supposed to impose what we think to them in any way, shape, or form.
And actually, now we've got a committee formed that's going to be also meeting with the school district alumni, and that they're going to have conversations about some of this stuff, so. I believe that was the only last thing on the item.
It is the last thing. Just a forecast.
Yeah,
Lynn and I have a meeting in early October with Richard to go over the next batch of policies. And so we'll be monitoring what we need to accomplish between now and the September meeting to wrap things up from this last series with you, get that on the board docket. But anticipate a busy fall into winter with policies.
Check the date again on the September meeting, because we've moved that, didn't we, to the 22nd? Because the board meeting is, I don't know, it doesn't matter to me one way or another. See, the board meeting has been moved from the 9th to the 16th. Wait, I can't hear you.
Sorry. Would you like to move the policy committee meeting to the 22nd then, so we're the week following the full board, so there's not so many meetings that week? Because F&F's on Monday. Policy would be Tuesday.
F&F would be on the 14th. 15th would have been our normal day, but that,
Right.
now that we're switching.
Because the first is on a Tuesday,
Yeah.
so we can move it 1 week out
To the 22nd.
if you'd like.
That's okay with me. Joe, do you see any negative effect of that? Okay. So we'll go with the 22nd. I think I'll see to it, we know that, right?
I will make sure to let everyone know.
I think I already talked to Sue about that, but we'll have to check. No, I know. I talked to her about the budget meeting. That's also on the 16th. Diane?
The other, if we're open for other recommendations for future meetings.
Yes. Yes, sure.
I think I've talked to you informally about the idea of what waivers might have to be in place because of all the new procedures, et cetera, that are going into effect, and any effect that would have on policy per se. What's your take on that?
Yeah, currently I think the only policy that we would really have to address, I mean, we've settled on the fact that kids will be on campus for lunch, so that takes that out of the mix. I think, preliminarily we'll be looking at the attendance policy, and we're still waiting to get some finalized guidance. On the what the county is going to expect from us on truancy reporting. But there's a number of things in the attendance policy that we don't want to penalize families for during what could be a very disruptive school year for them. So anticipate that we would come forward with just a resolution idea. Dr. Siebert and I have had a number of conversations about what waivers we may want to apply for as a district as a whole. So we may come forward with that at that time. There's not going to be any penalty for us to start out the school year and implement the practices that we need to implement to start the year, as you saw in that pandemic policy, which gives us some latitude. and then come to you with, anything that we would want to address through a waiver. Similarly, how we handled, I hate to say it, but, we could be back in that discussion around virtual meetings again, so we may have to come back and talk about what that virtual meeting policy looks like again, just to, make any corrections if we need to.
Speaking of that, and just maybe being a little bit, waivers and stuff like that, and how things will be scored, because I got an email today talking about my kid will be absent from all these different sessions because I'm not going to let him go into the building. I forgot, I'll send that one on to you. I saw it right before I came over here. And it raised another question in my mind relative to the school district's, what we call them, report cards. Are they going to be measured in a more logical way now, or don't we know?
The report card, they took all the state assessments out last year. There's no assessment piece, which is the bulk
Okay,
of that
that
report
answers my
card.
question.
So I don't know if the DPI decided not to issue the report cards this year, but they're going to be vacant, a lot of the information that they've had in the past,
Right.
ACT data, forward exam data. So I would not, if they do issue report cards over the next 2 school years, I wouldn't put a whole lot of stock in them because, it's.
Thank you. That was really the response I was looking for, because with everything else going on, it's awful hard to call anything a standard
Right.
that you should be meeting. Diane?
I think one of the things I received in my email today was from the School Administrators Alliance, the SAA, about flexibility on a lot of different topics. And, the notion of licensures, the getting retired teachers back, and being able to waive, the hours that they, that they are not limited to the number of hours that they can have and mess up their annuity. And then the 15 days break in service rather than the 90 days that they currently have, and some things like that, this, I think, would require legislative initiatives for all of these. But I think there's a lot of things that are kind of over our head, that it's not at a policy level, it's really like a legislative initiative. Back to why we want to be good friends with our legislators.
Yeah, and just see, we've been in a number of conversations with state level folks, the DHS, the DPI, you name it. And all of them are trying to figure out what their authority is during these particular years where we have this COVID going on. When can DHS step in? What is DHS's authority? There was a Supreme Court case a while back that has impacted that. What can the DPI do? So we as a school district are falling down into what can we do locally to keep our kids as safe as possible. We're waiting on some county guidance coming out shortly, hopefully within a week, to give us some framework. So yeah, absent anything out of the state, we'll do what we can locally to make sure we operate as effectively as we can.
Trying to keep some sanity.
Yeah.
Okay? Anything else? Then we will adjourn this meeting, and our next meeting will be on September 22nd.